Just want to say thank you very much for inviting me, and thanks everybody for coming to listen. I do have a PowerPoint which I'm going to pop up and share with you all in a minute. Just before I do that, I just wanted to say that yeah, it's a real pleasure to be invited. I only met, well, not met so much, sort of talked with Fiona a few weeks ago. So Eric was very much new to me. So it was really nice to have a great conversation and chat to Fiona about some of the work that we're hoping to do at Binchester Hall Farm. So thanks for inviting me. All right, I'm going to share my screen now. Much like Fiona was saying that, you know, you have a newfound respect for TV presenters. I have to say that it's very weird to be talking and doing these Zoom presentations, because obviously I can't see anyone. So I feel in a way like I'm just talking to the air, but hopefully you can all hear me, and hopefully you can all see my screen. So yeah, I'm going to talk tonight about, well, first of all, I'm going to give you a little bit of a background about the organisation that I work for, because the Auckland Project is quite an interesting organisation, and it helps to give a bit of context to where Binchester Hall Farm sort of sits in a much wider organisation. And then hopefully I'll talk a little bit more about Binchester Hall Farm and our new project. And I should say that really, this is right at the very beginning, and this is probably one of the first times I've actually talked about this, and it's kind of gone out into the wider world for information. So this is very much a kind of a first. Right, so let's begin. So the first thing I want to do is talk a very little bit about the Auckland Project. So this is the organisation that I work for. And it was founded by Jonathan Ruffer. So it's a charity, it's a charitable organisation. It was founded by a guy called Jonathan Ruffer, who was born up in Stokesay near Middlesbrough, and moved down, was studied and educated at Cambridge, and basically became an investment banker. And in 2010, he happened to hear about the fact that the Church of England was selling off some of its assets, and in particular, because he has quite a strong interest in Spanish art, he was quite concerned that a number of paintings that were being sold for, so 12 paintings by an artist called Francisco de Zurbarán were being sold from Auckland Castle, and he was worried that they might get sort of snatched up abroad and kind of be lost from the heritage of this country. So to cut a long story short, in 2011, Jonathan ended up buying both the 12 paintings and the castle in which the paintings were housed, and the 800 acres of land that also came with that. And what Jonathan did was put those into a trust, which became known as Auckland Castle Trust, and which is now the Auckland Project. And that's kind of how it all started. Now the Auckland Project has grown from there. So what I thought I'd do is just give you a very brief introduction to some of the other things that the Auckland Project is doing and is about and has really. Auckland Castle. So this is the castle, not actually technically a castle, but a palace, which was the home of the Prince Bishops. It's got about 1,000 years of history attached to it, and it is where the Bishop of Durham is now currently located. The picture on the top right is the ceiling of the chapel, which is that section with the wonderful walnut tree in front of it, which is a really beautiful part of the chapel. So that of the castle, that was built in the 1660s. And in the bottom right, you can see the throne room, which was this grand room that led to where you would meet the Prince Bishop on his throne, and makes you feel very small. And so that was acquired in 2011, but is actually restored and newly reopened in November 2019 to the public, which sadly was just a few months before we had to close because of COVID. And that's kind of perhaps the centre of the Auckland Project and where everything started. The landscape around the castle is particularly interesting because it has 200 acres of deer park, which is absolutely beautiful, and again has about 1,000 years of history attached to it. This was the Prince Bishops hunting grounds. There's also a 4-acre walled garden, which has just recently been restored and is now providing lots of fruits and vegetables and herbs. We're doing a really nice project that started with lockdown. We're actually using that food to help create meals for the local community, and also we're delivering it as part of a sort of food program that we're doing as well, to try and encourage people and get fresh fruit and fresh vegetables and herbs into diets, and to get people to have access to these things. So that's also part of the Auckland Project. We also have 2 art galleries. The first one, which is on the left, and it's that really beautiful building with the turrets, is the Mining Art Gallery, which houses a Gemini collection, which has over 400 works of art connected with mining art. So artists like Tom McGuinness, and that is a really, I mean, that's a really pertinent part of the Northeast history, and it's something that we've all got a really sort of soft spot for the Mining Art Gallery. It's quite a small and quite an intimate venue, and I think you get a really interesting view of kind of mining and everything that's kind of surrounded mining through going through there and looking at the art. And I think actually the Spanish Gallery, which has just opened in September this year, is kind of the opposite end of the scale. It's much more ostentatious, and yeah, it's a totally different experience. It's a much richer and more vibrant and a totally different experience, but both really, really interesting contrasts of art, and kind of gives you another flavor of the diversity that there is within our kind of portfolio. And I'd like to just talk about the other things. So we acquired Weardale Railway last year, which is basically a local railway that goes into the Dales, and we're currently helping to really rebuild the infrastructure on that, and we're hoping to get services back up and running in 2022. The picture with the fireworks is Kinren, which is a sister charity that Jonathan Ruffer also started, and which I suspect some of you have probably heard of. If you've heard nothing else about the Auckland Project, you might have been to Kinren, which is this night show and also a day park now, which basically tells the story of 2,000 years of British history. There's a tower, which, oh, don't want to do that, sorry. There's a tower which is in the centre, which is used as a ticket office. It also has on the first floor is a place where to display archaeology from a lot of the archaeology work we've been doing. And you can actually go up the tower to a viewing platform. And there are some amazing views when you can go up there. You can see a lot of the deer park at Kinren and kind of the wider landscape as well. The building on the top right, which is in beautiful light in that photograph, is the Faith Museum. This is currently under construction, and again is another strong theme, I guess, in the Auckland Project, because Jonathan himself has a strong faith, and so this museum is set up to talk about faith in the British Isles for about the last 2,000 years, really, and then how that's affected and how we sort of think about faith today. And that is due, and I'd like to say I know when that's due to be open, and I should know, I think it's 2022 at some point, but it's still a work in progress. Sorry, the bottom right is an image which is really close to my heart, because that's really the hub of our community development work at the moment. So that's number 42 in the marketplace. It's a community hub. We do lots of interesting things, and a lot of our community work happens in that hub. We have art exhibitions in there currently. One is a street art exhibition, which is really interesting. We have creative forums running out of there. We do lots of health and well-being activities as well. And yeah, it's just the hub of our community work. And the last image is the one of the archaeology, and that's actually at Binchester Roman Fort. So we're incredibly lucky to live in an area with such a rich history, and actually Binchester Roman Fort is kind of underneath the ground, and a little bit of it is exposed, but that's right in the centre of actually Binchester Hall Farm, where the farmland lies. A lot of archaeology has been done there. We believe it to be a pretty significant Roman settlement, possibly one of the biggest in the country, and there's lots of archaeology still to be done there, and there's a couple of areas exposed at the moment, which you will see a bit later, but it's and the archaeological work that's been done around the castle is always very exciting, and there's a lot of community interest and participation in that as well, and we just keep finding out more and more all the time about kind of what's around the castle, and also what's happening at Binchester. So that gives you a flavour of kind of the I guess the big parts of the Auckland project, and it's quite substantial. And then last but certainly not least, from my point of view, is Binchester Hall Farm. So Binchester Hall Farm is in the centre. I'm gonna show you a map in a moment, just so we can see where it is. But basically, it's 118 hectares, which is about just shy of 300 acres of land. It's a farm land. It's pasture. We have cattle and sheep on there currently, and occasionally a few horses. And again, the Auckland Project, as landowners, we're just incredibly lucky to be landowners of such a wide, diverse array of landscapes actually, and buildings as well. And one of the things that started off this whole project was kind of thinking about how we can better steward our lands, and how we can work to improve our landscapes and make them more nature friendly. Now, I don't know about anybody else here, but yeah, for me, I really like to kind of orientate myself. So I wanted to put in a map. It's a little bit of a crude map, but I think it gives you the idea. So I'll just explain that Bishop Auckland is down here to the south. You can see Auckland Castle, which is this sort of square area here. The deer park stretches around here and abuts the golf course. To the left, the River Weir just really beautifully meanders and actually forms the western boundary of the farm. This area here, just north of the castle, is Kinrin. Where it says Binchester, basically, that's where the Roman fort, pretty much the Roman fort is going to go all the way underneath. And we know that Deer Street runs through Bishop Auckland, but sorry, that's my partner just putting some coal on the fire, sorry. And this really interesting thing here to the left is a sewage works, and we have the most amazing beautiful wood to the north, which is called Bellbone Wood, which is well worth a visit in the spring because it has beautiful bluebells, celandines, wild garlic, wood anemones. It's really, really beautiful. So hopefully that kind of gives you an idea geographically of kind of where we're located, and really quite an interesting landscape around the farm with the river, with the sewage works, with the amazing archaeology and the woodland as well. We're really lucky. And I haven't got very many photographs of the farm, but this managed to get hold of this from John Castling, our community archaeologist, and it was done in 2018, and it's just a little bit of drone footage. So I'm just going to play this. It's only about 20 seconds or so, but it just kind of gives you a feel of the landscape. The wooded area in the centre is Bellbone, so that sort of marks the northern boundary of the farm. But obviously it goes off quite far to the east and uphill to the uphill to the west. And this area here with the brown building is the Roman fort. This is actually a bathhouse in there, and there's part of Deer Street that sort of runs in a straight line, and then there's a white building which is actually another bathhouse that's been excavated as well. So I'm just going to play this. I'm not. Oh, sorry. I really love that little piece of footage. One can see just at the top of the screen there, that's Kinren, and you're looking sort of south, and you can see some of the farm buildings there, top right. Interestingly, if you look straight ahead, and you can see there's a sort of white building just off centre to the right. That's the Binchester Hall, which the farm was actually named after, and doesn't exist anymore because it was knocked down. So that's not there anymore. Right, and something else that I absolutely love is this map. And I always put it in my presentations because it's absolutely wonderful to have something from 1772. And when I was really lucky that a landscape architect who was looking after the deer park actually said, oh, I've got this map, I'll send you a copy, it's really beautiful. And it's a Jeremiah Dixon map from 1772. And it shows down here at the bottom, that's Auckland Castle, the deer park. And you can see that also partly the farm is on here, so lands that were the farm. It wasn't actually, though, for quite some time after I'd had this on my desktop, and I sent it to Tim Sedgewick, who is our tenant farmer. And it just so happened that he looked in the bottom right-hand corner, and you can't see it at all at this size, but there's mention of a Thomas Sedgewick, Esquire, from the 1772 map. So we got very excited because it just feels really wonderful, and we're pretty certain, we're doing a little bit of research, but I think we're quite sure that this is probably the same Cedric family and an ancestor, and it just feels really wonderful that actually our current farmers have this wonderful kind of family history and connection to the landscape, and that just kind of feels meant to be, actually. And so that really brings me to talking a little bit about the Cedric family, because quite simply, we can't do this project without the farming family that have been looking after Binchester Hall Farm. So I just want to introduce them, and I really do hope that in the future Tim and I will be presenting together, and very much as we go forward with his expertise and knowledge of the land and that of his family as well. So the Cedric family lived at Binchester. They actually moved there in 1995, and they set up their business there, and they were there at Binchester and farming until 2010, when the church sold the land, and the Sedgwicks then moved to Newton Aycliffe, but they came back to the farm to farm as tenant farmers for the Auckland Project in 2010. And the family, I'd just like to say, is Tim and Gordon. Gordon is the father, and he's been farming and I guess if he decides to retire at some point in the future, then maybe Binchester Hall Farm will go into Tim's hands, and together, very much together, we've been kind of creating this project and talking about how it can move forward and sharing a lot of ideas. We're so lucky to have them because they're a very respected farming family. They've already looked after Binchester Hall Farm for a considerable amount of time, so they understand the land, and they have farmed very carefully, obviously with the archaeology. We also have ridge and furrow in some of the fields, and there's been a lot of additional things that this farm brings with it, which they have very carefully farmed around. And yeah, I guess also there's this thing of me coming along and saying, well, maybe we could do something different, and maybe we could farm a bit differently here. And instead of basically telling me to go away and saying that I was crazy, actually they listened, and they actually agreed with some of the things that I was saying, and they were really interested. And they've been just incredibly generous going along with this idea and taking this project forward. So that's really brilliant. And I'm so grateful to have them all with us on board. And so now I'm going to move a little bit to what is our vision and why, and I'm going to leave the and how bit. And what I'm going to do for this bit is that I'm going to apologize for not being a really great artist, because one of the things I think is quite difficult is to I think it's quite easy sometimes to point out everything that's wrong. It's not so easy to articulate how you could make things better or what the kind of end would be. And if I was an artist, I would be able to create this really beautiful picture or painting of what the farm might look like in the future, but I'm not. So what I have done instead is just to kind of create a little piece of descriptive writing, if you like, to kind of explain the vision and kind of imagine what it might be like. And so I'm just going to read this to you, and just so you can, I know that you're all kind of, hopefully you're all there listening, but just kind of allow this to kind of percolate and perhaps visualize or see or hear or think about how the farm might be with our vision. Hedgerows blossom with hawthorns, crabapples and wild roses. Newly planted glades of trees cast dappled shade. Bees, butterflies and birds thrive. You can see and hear them. Sheep and cattle wander rich pastures, where grasses and meadows reflect healthy soils teeming with microorganisms. They help us to draw down carbon, filter water, and enhance the health and quality of life for our animals. The farm is home to regenerative agriculture. It connects to a nationwide network of organisations and supports and mentors farmers looking to start their own regenerative journeys. The taste of our 100% pasture-fed beef and lamb is locally loved, locally sold, and our brand has become trusted for its ethos and quality. Further afield, our regeneratively farmed sheep's wool is used by the North Face in their sustainable clothing range. We are passionate about connecting as many people as possible with our project, encouraging community access and involvement in every step of our journey. From a farm school project to citizen science, from learning about beekeeping to a camera obscura installation, we're hoping Binchester Hall Farm becomes a site of learning, science and creativity, which will benefit the health and well-being of all who come to visit us. Whether meeting our farmer for a tour, volunteering to plant trees, or just popping down from town for a peaceful walk through our magical meadows one evening, we hope to share the stories of our landscape and our nature-based techniques, and how these are helping to regenerate our land. So welcome to Binchester Hall Farm. Welcome to these fields for the future. Enlightened agriculture for the 21st century, where farming good food goes hand in hand with restoring ecosystems, and where the well-being of people and nature is at the heart of what we do. And while I let that kind of percolate into you, and hopefully it gives you a little bit of an idea of where we'd like to be in a few years' time, we're very aware that this is a long-term project with long-term goals, and it's going to take a long time for us to get there. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about why. And I can only talk from my own point of view about why. My background is horticulture, which I was talking to Fiona earlier, and I was saying, you know, I'm not an expert at all in agriculture, but there are many similarities with horticulture. And I've always had a really strong sense of the importance of nature. And I think we as humans, perhaps most recently with COVID, I think we've really begun to understand how important nature is for our health and well-being. And not only that, but of course, increasingly, we're understanding that actually we're doing quite a lot of damage in many different ways. And we have a lot of kind of existential threats around us because of the way that we've been kind of treating, I suppose, the natural environment. So we have climate change, we have biodiversity loss, we have lots of problems with pollution. And these, I think, in turn are really sort of affecting our health and well-being as well. And I'm really aware that land management and the way that we eat and what we eat and the way that we farm is currently causing some of the problems. And I think that as responsible stewards of the land, we need to think about how we might be able to do these things better. What is it that we're doing that's causing and creating the problems, and how might we begin to be able to change those? And can we do something differently that might actually leave a positive legacy for the land and improve the landscape around us and our ecosystem health, and also our own health and well-being? And how can we do that? And the way that we've decided, or the direction of travel, I guess, that we've decided to try is regenerative farming. Now, there's a lot of, even within agricultural fields and discussions, there's a lot of kind of talk about what is and what isn't regenerative farming. You know, where does that lie with organic farming and with ideas of sustainable farming, and you know, and agroecology. So there's lots of different kind of words being thrown around, I think, for something that's quite similar. And there's also actually rewilding, I should say, is also a part of this kind of wider conversation of land management and agricultural management. And I think that one of the things that I need to say about regenerative agriculture is that it's not prescriptive in terms of the fact that it gives you rules so much as it's a set of principles. And I found this infographic, which I think is actually a really helpful way to think about it. And we've chosen to go down this route of regenerative agriculture. Actually, in many ways, this isn't new, which is a weird thing for me to say, but it's not new so much as in many ways its principles are quite old, and probably what we used to do, a lot of us here in the West, and it's probably a lot of the way that farming was carried out and is still being carried out in some parts of the world. And what we're doing is kind of rediscovering it, and also rediscovering sort of the evidence and sort of empirical evidence that actually this is really good. It's really good for the health of the land. It's really good for the health of animals. And yeah, really good for improving biodiversity and reducing some of the issues that we have. And so we'd really be interested, and we are really interested in trying this and seeing how it works at Binchester Hall Farm. One of the great things about it, and I'm going to just go through briefly some of these areas, not all of them are directly related to the work we're doing at Binchester, but I think it gives you a wider idea of regenerative agriculture. But the first thing, and one of the most important things from my point of view, is that regenerative agriculture can be tailored to the context of where you are. So it doesn't assume that all agriculture is the same, or that all land is the same, or that even all farms or all farming families are the same. Actually, it kind of starts from the assumption that every farm is an individual farm in an individual landscape with an individual context. And one of the things that's been really important for us, and we've worked with the Cedric family and with myself and with the wider TAP organisation, the Auckland Project, we call it TAP for short, is how do we create a context for our farm, and how do we create something so that we know where we are and where we'd like to be. So that's what we've done, and we've created our context, and part of my vision really is expanding that context to explain what it would look like. But the context of the farm then provides a kind of really good sense checker for your decision making. So when you're making a decision about a farm operation or something that you're doing or something you want to try, it's a great thing to have, because then you can ask yourself the question, okay, is what we're doing here actually part of making things better and leading us towards our vision and goal and where we want to be, or not? Minimizing soil disturbance doesn't really apply very much to a pasture-based farm, very much more to arable. We know that ploughing is not good for our soils, destroys soil life, releases carbon. There's many ways in which, and I know farming is moving towards a kind of low till or no till, or even direct drilling. But that's not really applying to our farm. But many of these things I kind of tweak them to see how they fit with our farm. So maximizing crop diversity, for instance. And we don't have any arable crops on our farm, but we do have a crop in a way, which is grass. So our pasture, our grass is our crop. So how can we create greater diversity in our grass? And that's one of the things that a regenerative agricultural model for grasslands looks at. So the diversity of the grasses that are part of the sward, and also potential for wildflowers and meadows, and bringing in a greater diversity of flora into the grasslands. So that's something we're going to look at. And also trees. So tree can be a crop. Absolutely, you can have a walnut tree or a hazel tree and you can harvest that crop. It could be a crop in the sense of for wildlife. So one of the things we've got is a lot of trees, and we're going to be gapping up some of our hedgerows. A lot of these trees are going to be food crops actually for wildlife. So we've got hawthorns and crabapples and things that are going to provide fruits and food for wildlife, as well as for humans potentially. So there's a lot of interest in agriculture in terms of agroforestry, which is basically planting trees for alternative uses. So they can be food crops in their own right, absolutely. But there's lots of interesting stuff happening around the medicinal value of trees, and trees as fodder for cattle, trees as shelter for cattle. So there's many ways in which trees can be a part of our landscape and help to improve and increase the diversity of our grasslands. The last three things I'm going to lump together. I don't know if I should, but that's how I'm going to do it, because it means that I can talk about one of the most important changes that we're looking at on the farm. So we are working, we are going to be working with quite a specialized, I guess is the word, or quite a structured way of grazing our cattle, which is called holistic planned grazing. Now, I'm not going to go massively into this right now, but it's absolutely fascinating. It comes from work done by a guy called Alan Savory out in Zimbabwe. He does a TED talk. Some of you might have seen it. He's a conservationist originally, and he looked at desertification and reversing desertification in Africa, in Zimbabwe specifically, and what caused it, and ways of trying to ameliorate that and repair that. So this idea of holistic management in agriculture comes from his work. And the way that translates into our farm is going to be quite interesting, because it basically means that you change the way that animals graze. And I don't really change the way that animals graze, it's just that you change the way you manage the way that animals graze, might be a better way of putting it. And so it means that you might have more animals in a smaller space, and they will graze a smaller space for quite a short time, maybe just 1 day or 2 days. And then you will move them on. And then you will allow that place that they grazed to recover from their grazing. And so you will move them on in a very planned way from place to place. And this allows the cattle to always be moving on, always to be eating fresh grass. And it always allows time for the grass left behind to regenerate and regrow. And one of the things that this does, and I get quite excited about this because I know that I don't know, it might seem a bit boring, but to me, I think this is really fascinating. So there's a lot of interesting sort of work coming out about the way that herbivores and ruminants and grasslands sort of co-evolved. And if a cow, let's take a cow, if a cow grazes the grass down really low, the grass, and then it's doing this all the time. So the grass never gets a chance to regrow properly. Now that has several kind of effects on the grassland. One, it means that your grass is always stunted, so it never grows properly. Number two, if the top of your grass doesn't grow properly, it can't absorb sunlight, and therefore it can't grow bigger. And then also its roots can't grow bigger. And because interestingly, a plant, a grass plant, when it's munched at the top, its roots will actually slough away in proportion to how it's been grazed at the top. Now, if you're always grazing your grass super low, you will always be keeping your roots super low. So the grass will never grow properly. It will not absorb sunlight and be able to get bigger, but more importantly, it will not be able to absorb as much carbon. And that carbon and nutrition from the plant will not feed down into the soil. This therefore has a knock-on effect to your soils and the soil biota, the life in your soil, the way that your soil even absorbs water and absorbs carbon totally changes. The net result of all this is that if you can change the way that you graze, if you can allow the plants more time to recover, it means they get the chance to grow bigger, it means they get the chance to absorb more sunlight, it means that more carbon filters down into the soil, it means that your soils are healthier, your soil biota is healthier, which in turn means that the plant itself is healthier, because this is a mutualistic relationship, which means that your cows are then grazing better grass, which means the quality of the meat that comes from your cows and the health of your cows is going to improve. I think this is very, very interesting, and we are really, really excited to try this at the farm, and that's one of the core changes that we're going to be making. Sorry if I got too excited about that. I hope that made sense. In a wider sense, I also wanted to talk about three things that to me are completely intertwined. I don't think you can have any of these things without the other. And the whole work that we're doing in the farm is trying to look at these three things. So we're trying to look at the ecological outcomes don't know whether I want to use the word outcomes, actually, the ecological impact of the work that we're doing and of the changes that we're making, the social impact of the changes that we're making. And yes, of course, we do need to think about the economic impact as well. But I think that all of those things are very deeply interconnected. The ecological impact is something I'm going to talk about in the next and last slide. The social impact, again, actually is something I'm going to talk about in a minute, but something that I wanted to really highlight is that one of the things that we really hope that the farm is going to be is very accessible, and that, like I say, at every step of the way, hopefully we can have people and as many people as possible to be involved in the work that we're doing and get to be a part of that. And I think hopefully we will be able to create some economic gain. Yes, the farm itself needs to be financially viable, and that's a very important part of it. It needs to be able to create a living for our farming families. But also I'd really like it to be, I'm really interested in how we can get people back to the land. And something with a background in horticulture and having been a gardener for quite a long time, I have a feeling that things like gardening and agriculture, being a farmer, being a gardener, is kind of something that when you're at school, it's something that, like, if you're bright or if you're able or capable, you don't really get put into those paths. It's kind of seen as something for people that maybe aren't so good at things. And I feel that that's quite a kind of well-established way of thinking, and I think it's something that we need to change, because I think that actually our work on the land and the way that we manage the land and our relationship with nature and understanding nature is actually one of the most important things, and actually does require a great deal of skill and intelligence and understanding. And I think we're going to need more and more of that in the future. And I'd really like to encourage people to be more, to see the value, I think, in work that's connected with the land. And hopefully that in turn will generate apprenticeships perhaps, or hopefully paid work as well in the future. So that's something else that we're quite keen to do. And I'm going to move on to the last slide, and I'm sorry because I kind of feel like this is what I should really have been talking to this group about. But one of the things that I'm incredibly interested in is collecting and monitoring data and information to see and measure our progress as we move forward. I think this is really important, particularly in the quite scientific or empirical kind of age that we live in, where this kind of quantitative data is actually quite important and can help to inform a lot of decision making. And I'd really like to be part of that, particularly if we can help to demonstrate that regenerative agriculture is having positive benefits. This may help to shift farming, and perhaps the elms that are currently coming in to replace the subsidies and the European subsidies that are being phased out, perhaps we can help to kind of direct those to being including things like regenerative agriculture and agroecology. And so I'd really like to be part of that. Also, it would be really wonderful if we could help, and if I could learn as well, and if volunteers and if members of our community could learn more about collecting data, about how we can use that, about feeding into something larger than themselves. As part of the work that we've done with the regenerative agriculture consultants that we're using, the holistic planned grazing, we've done some ecological monitoring in terms of biodiversity of flora. So what plants are currently growing in our fields, we've also done carbon. So we've looked at carbon. So how much carbon is our land currently storing? Again, that's not an exact science, but if we use the same method over a number of years, then we should be able to get quite consistent data. And we're also looking at water infiltration. So how is water percolating through our soils? So we've got baseline measurements for those three things. I'm also very keen to get an ecological. So we have had a ecological survey done by Durham Wildlife Trust, actually as part of Binchester Roman Fort. This happened in 2017. So we had an overall survey done, and then we had some very specific surveys on bats, mammals and birds. But I'm quite interested, and I know Fiona and Sue were talking at the beginning about earthworms. I get quite excited about kind of soil organisms particularly, and something that's really great for farms is dung beetles. So you can start to tell such a great deal about your land and how things are going by looking at dung beetle populations. I've been to a couple of quite interesting talks on that. So I would be really, really interested if anybody has any ideas or thoughts or things that you might, or things you might be able to help us with in terms of monitoring and collecting information. I should say that I have been in touch with the Weir Rivers Trust, and they're really interested in helping us to do some work looking at silt levels in the river and how the changing way of grazing and seeing how that might affect the quality of water in the river. So that's really interesting. But I'd also be really interested in anything to do with kind of soil organisms, or even particular sort of mammals or particular birds, farmland birds perhaps, and just things that would be quite useful indicators for us to see if the way that we're farming is actually making a difference. And one of the other things that I really would like that to be is very much something that's open. So it's an opportunity for people to come in and help us to collect this information and to learn new skills, and where might we go, I suppose, to find and learn those skills and then actually put them into practice, and hopefully feed our records back to Eric, which is kind of part of the little conversation that Fiona and I had a few weeks ago, was looking at ways in which we could work and perhaps work together to kind of share data and information, and also kind of upskill some of our community to help us do that as well. So it would be wonderful if anyone has any ideas for us. That would be great. And I think I'm going to leave it there because I feel like I've talked for ages, and I hope that that was interesting and made some sense. And I do get a little bit excited about things sometimes. So hopefully it did actually make sense. Thank you everyone very much for listening. And I've just put some details on there for myself and for the Auckland Project. And I would love to have something for Binchester Hall Farm, which I don't have at the moment, which just is a sign of how new this is. But please do look out for it, because I know Tim is very keen to get us up and running on social media as soon as possible, so we can start sharing what we're doing with the wider world. So look out for that. Thank you. That's it.
Thanks, Tam. Thanks. That was really interesting. It feels exciting to be hearing about this. Right, it was pretty much the start of the whole project. So it's a great time to be learning about it. I think we have got some questions there in the chat. Is that right, Paul?
Yeah, there's a few questions come through. Do you just want me to go through them?
Can do. Yeah. I was talking, so you give people a change of voice.
Cool. Right. I'll just find my way around the questions. Right. So I've had a question about what range of species are there already. So you mentioned some of the survey work that's already been done there, Tam? Do you have a little bit more info on what sort of things we're finding there?
Yeah, I'm trying to rack my brain actually, and I suppose I should have expected a question like that. Yeah, so we did the survey back in 2019, and no is the answer off the top of my head. Quite nice range of grasses, things like timothy and cocksfoot, which are quite good indicators in a pasture. So we have some of those, and a nice range of grasses, fescues. The exciting thing that we found is bird's foot trefoil, which I believe the legumes are really, really good indicators, and obviously they're nitrogen fixing. So they're helping to put nitrogen back naturally into our soils. And apparently, I think if they're quite good as signs of if your land has not been overgrazed. So the Sedgewicks actually had put quite a large area of land into a higher level stewardship agreement, which had then allowed certain areas to become sort of meadowlands. So we had a lot of buttercups, things like field scabious, we had a few of those. And like I say, bird's foot trefoil was the thing that actually we all got really excited about finding. And I wish I could remember more, but those are just a few of the things that we found. If that answers the question, I'm not sure.
I think it's a good start, and it kind of gives you a little bit of a feel for some of the sort of grassland communities that might be on there. So I'll just work my way through the questions. I'll try not to miss any out. So it's quite an interesting one here. So you mentioned wool being used by the North Face for sustainable clothing. Has you heard of alpaca wool, sheep wool being used for compost?
Well, no, but actually I do have some compost that I bought from, I don't know if anybody knows Cross Lanes, but Cross Lanes Organic, they have a wonderful farm shop there, and actually they are also doing holistic management, and they sell bags of compost which have sheep's wool in them. So I do actually have a bag of that in my shed.
Excellent, wonderful. So we've got a question here. So in minimising the soil disturbance, how will soil be enriched for growing crops? Was the plans to grow crops? Yeah.
I guess we're talking about arable crops here, which isn't really my, and I should say I'm not a specialist in agriculture, but cover crops, so planting cover crops in seasons when you don't have crops in there will help to, basically your soil is, there's a wonderful cycle that happens with your soil depending on what's planted in it. If you have bare soil, basically nothing is happening in your soil because the microorganisms are not being fed. They're kind of being fed a little bit by each other, but really what they need is this wonderful kind of mutual relationship with plant roots. So any plant that is in the ground is feeding the soil in one way or another. And obviously we know quite a lot about nitrogen fixing plants. So that's where you put in your clovers and your kind of cover crops that will help to put something back in the soil. But I'm not sure I can really answer that question in any more depth than that. Basically, any plant that you put in the soil is going to be feeding it in one way or the other. So always try and have your soil covered, but don't really dig. So a mulch on top and planting in from horticultural point of view, no dig, great. You know, put your mulch on top and then plant on top of that is great. No dig gardening. Love that.
Thank you. So I've got another question here. Is there any plans to rewild any areas of the farm? Well, it depends what the questioner means by rewilding. So I'm not
again, that's quite a big area of discussion. So not in terms of reintroducing kind of species, but perhaps in terms of, well, it's interesting because I think this idea of going back to, if using the kind of grassland ecology thinking, it kind of is rewilding. So yes, we might have had buffalo in past times roaming our grasslands, and now we're kind of using cows or sheep or other ruminants to kind of mimic that that kind of ancient ecosystem, if you like, that we've lost. So in a way, I think this kind of regenerative approach is quite rewilding in and of itself, in the way that we're moving animals around and we're pretending to be predators, which is why we're moving the animals on constantly. We're hoping to plant a lot more trees, which I also see as a kind of rewilding, and letting the landscape, letting some areas of the landscape, yes, perhaps not be grazed at all or be grazed very lightly. So we're looking at the way in which we can, the area particularly down by the Weir, which is traditionally would have been, originally would have been floodplains. So how might we kind of restore some wildlife corridors, or move more towards how it might have been, so let's say water meadows potentially, or some way of making it less farmed in a traditional sense and more natural. Yeah, definitely
absolutely.
plans to look at that.
Yeah, so I mean, even things like just natural regeneration of woodland rather than planting on the likes could also be an option as well. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Actually, that reminds me of one of my favourite moments when I found in one of the wonderful meadows to the east of the farm, we found a little oak sapling about this big, because we have this wonderful stretch of trees, which is almost like a kind of ancient wood meadow area. And obviously one of the, because it hasn't been grazed, this wonderful acorn sapling had grown. So I was just, it was lovely to see an oak there, a little baby oak.
Excellent. Wonderful.
Mm.
I'll carry on with the questions. So are you measuring how much the change in practices affect the carbon absorbed? So I suppose we're talking about carbon storage. The person who sent the question said they're not sure how this might be done. They're just curious. I mean, I suppose it maybe asks it sort of prompts a wider question about, do you have any plans to work with any of the universities or anything like that to kind of measure what's happening on the land? Or
yes, very much like to do that. Particularly, there's a couple of things. The nutrient density of the meat. I'm really interested. I have got some contacts from Newcastle, I think, that we're really hoping that we can get some work done on that. We are measuring carbon, but it's we're only measuring it currently every 5 years. So we've got a baseline, and I'm not exactly sure how it happens, but just in case you're interested, basically we take a soil sample using one of those soil corers, which then gets sent off to a laboratory, and then it gets dried. I think what they do is measure the difference between the dry weight, the wet weight, and the dry weight, and then something in there tells them the amount of carbon. So we are doing that currently, but it happens every 5 years, and we're not doing it on an annual basis yet. But again, I'm quite interested. The science is still very much, there's many different ways in which we can measure carbon, and actually we're not very good at it. The science isn't very good at it yet. So it's quite, there's many different ways that it can be done, and many different laboratories, I think, are measuring it slightly differently. So I think we're almost kind of like seeing where things go as to how we start to measure the carbon, and kind of see where the science goes with that. But it's very important, really important.
Absolutely. It's just about having those connections, isn't it? And just sort of linking up. I'm sure we can try and help out where we can, in sort of terms of signposting and the likes.
That would be great.
So carrying on. Julie has asked, she delivers STEM sessions in school. would the site accept school visits? It would be great to get the kids measuring and monitoring the progress.
Yes, definitely. That's something I'm really keen on getting started as soon as possible. We're looking at maybe setting up a little farm school project and piloting that with one of our local schools. But totally agree. I'd love to get young people involved as much as possible. And I think the monitoring side of things would be great. You know, hunting out creepy crawlies and stuff. I've done river monitoring with kids, and it just works so well. So yeah, definitely that's something that we're really keen to do. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier when we were chatting, Tam, that you're happy to share your email address, so I can pop that in an email to all the participants, and Julie could get in touch with you directly even. So
yeah, that would be great. Like I say, we are right at the beginning of the journey, and we're really interested in the different ways that we can take this, and kind of, yeah. So any ideas or thoughts there would be really welcomed. Yeah, thank you.
That's great. So we've got one last question in the chat, then I've got a couple myself as well. Louise is actually planning on increasing the wildflowers in the meadows or open wood areas.
Sorry, are you planning on doing that?
Yeah, so I suppose like increasing diversity. Yes, planning on increasing that, yeah.
Yeah, one of the things we're quite interested in is looking at the way we can change patterns of grazing, and then seeing how that kind of affects the diversity of plants and within the pastures. And yeah, potentially restoring, like I say, I have been in touch with the Weir Rivers Trust, and we've looked at the potential for putting for water meadows and actually improving kind of the areas down along the floodplains, and kind of, obviously that would be a different set of species and a different kind of, so yes, all of those things. But one of the things that we're really interested in is we don't really want to go out and plant or create a meadow. What we would like to see is to change our grazing practices, and then to see how the land responds to those changes. So will there be a natural seed bank, and will some plants come through that maybe have been previously grazed off, and do it in that way, rather than necessarily going in and actually creating something, although that may be part of what we do as well.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. Right, so that's the sort of end of the questions in the chat. Like I say, I've just got a couple. So a project a few years ago, I was seeing a conference, a talk from a guy at the Nature Friendly Farming Network.
Yes.
Have you come across this organisation?
Yes, I have.
Yeah.
I'm aware of them. I haven't been directly in touch with them, but yes.
Yeah, I just think there might be sort of quite a useful organisation. They seem to be very good, certainly at the monitoring side, and sort of being able to sort of like collect the data and make it robust, and sort of use it to sort of prove the activities they do and have a sort of benefit for nature and as the farmers as well, you know. So it might be certainly worth just hitting them up, and I'm sure they'd be sort of quite happy to give a bit of advice as well along the way. And just another one on dung beetles. So it just so happens that my counterpart over in Cumbria has a real passion for dung beetles. And a couple of years ago, she actually brought several trays of dung to the museum for us to have a session for people to hunt through and find dung beetles and look at them under the microscope, as you do.
Sounds great.
But I mean, the thing is that dung beetles is actually sort of something that's reasonably accessible, in that they're actually sort of the majority that you you're probably likely to find you can if you get your sort of skills up and the likes, you can actually sort of pick out what they are in the field and the likes. And there's a project. I don't know if it's still running. It was called the Dung Beetle UK Mapping Project. DUMP for short. Very apt name. But it might be worth sort of checking them out if you've already got sort of a network in the sort of community of people who you think might be interested in that sort of thing. Just check it up. And the thing is, there's sort of lots of resources online as well that might be able to help with something like that.
Wonderful, thank you very much. I will look them up. Now, I think dung beetles are they're brilliant, and I think it's great fun going to hunt for them, and yeah, I think it's something we could do with young people as well. And
yeah, absolutely. It's
really cool.
Fantastic for engaging kids. It's really, it's a great resource, as it were.
Yeah, great, thank you. I will look both of those up.
I think that was all the questions in the chat. I'm just wondering if anybody else wanted just to ask a live question, or are we about done there? If you wanted to switch your video on and unmute and ask a question. I don't see anyone. Maybe if I'll just, oh right, there's another question just popped up. Louise is asking if you'll be reducing the internal medication of cattle to help increase dung beetles.
Yeah, great, a really good question. And yes, I mean, I haven't talked at all about that. One of the things that we're hoping to do is really look at reducing and eventually eliminating, I think, any kind of artificial inputs, both to our cattle and to and to the grassland. So nitrogen, for instance, even though we don't use a lot, we still do. So yes, I'm very interested in the way that medication to animals has that effect. And one of the things we're really hoping is that this grazing regime is gonna hopefully have a positive impact on the health of the animals, and we're hoping that then we will need less antibiotics and lots of the other things that we currently are giving to cattle and sheep. And hopefully, absolutely, that's going to be much better for our dung beetle populations and for our soil and insect populations. And yes, so yes, we're really hoping to do that, and really hoping to show that connection as well, to show that actually by changing the way that you're grazing, you can reduce the need for giving antibiotics or medicating cattle, basically. Yes.
Great. Yeah, it is really fantastic to hear about this project going on. Yeah, Julie, I've just popped. Julie's asking about a recording. I'll do the copy of our YouTube channel. So yeah, having this project in the northeast, you know, we've heard of, probably most of us have heard of the project at Knepp and Wild Ken Hill, which, you know, sort of related kind of similar projects. So yeah, it's really fantastic to hear about something close to us. I'm imagining things, there could be things like workshops, people learn about, I don't know, it could be botany or invertebrates, and then get out and do some recording, something for people to look out for next year, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely, Fiona. I'd love to do that, and I think that might be one of the easiest and quickest things that we can do and get set up, actually. And I think the sooner obviously I'm really aware now that we've got the go-ahead, that the sooner we can start to monitor and get a kind of baseline for things, and then we can start to look at the change over time. So yeah, it'd be great to do that.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah. Good. Yeah, I think then, well, we've been yeah, it's coming up for 10 to 9, so that's been great and a really interesting way to spend the evening. Lots of compliments in the chat there, so
Thank you. I
thanks.
haven't seen that, but
All right,
thank
well,
you very much.
You
Thanks,
can
everyone.
stay on just a wee minute at the end and have a quick look through the chat before you go. But yeah, just on behalf of everyone, thanks so much for sharing that, Tam. And it was nice to get the sort of bigger picture of the whole project and what's going on, and to see this the focus as well on the ecological and just the sort of an ecological project in the wider sense, connecting up nature and humans, well-being, economy. Nice to have that big vision going on. So, and again, just like ecology, you've got the details and the niche stuff, but it's all connected. So that's been really fascinating. And thanks so much for talking tonight. So we'll look forward to doing something in the spring and summer, and maybe we'll meet some of these people who've been here tonight out in the field. So thanks for that, Tam. It's been great.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Fiona.
So I'll just say thanks to everybody for joining in who's still here. I know some people have had to go, and we've got the talk on, a plug for the talk on Wednesday with Nick Broden about marine conservation zones and the Eider Aware project that's been running in Northumberland, and caddisflies on the 14th of December. So hope to see some of you there, and thanks for joining us tonight.